Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Anomalies, a show about things that we don't always understand, but we always find fascinating, and we're happy to have you with us to explore those things. I'm Gwen Farrell. I'm one of your hosts, and my co-host today is Dan Hall. Hi, Dan. How's it going?
Hey, pretty good for an old guy,
Yeah,
Gwen.
well, we're glad to hear that. Our
Yeah.
special guest today is Trey Hudson, who's going to have some remarkable things to talk to us about. But before we get started with the questions, I'm going to give you a little information about some of the amazing things that he's done. So, all right, here we go. Trey is the current director of the Anomalous Studies and Observation Group that focuses on investigating incidents and places of extreme high strangeness from a multidisciplinary point of view. He earned a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in anthropology at the University of West Virginia. While there, he was awarded a U.S. Army scholarship, and upon graduation, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Army Reserves, where he trained and branched into military intelligence. After college, Trey worked as a private investigator, investigating insurance fraud, and became certified as an all-source intelligence officer in the Army. He has been awarded the Department of Army Achievement Medal for civilian service, the Commander's Award for civilian service 3 times, the Army Superior Unit Award, the Global War on Terrorism Civilian Service Medal, and the NATO International Security and Assistance Medal. In addition, he is an EMS first responder, combat lifesaver, rescue scuba diver, certified military emergency management specialist, certified DoD security professional, and an extra class amateur radio operator, which is really cool. In 1989, Trey entered the federal government service as a security specialist and retired from the Department of Defense in May of 2023 as a supervisory security specialist in an intelligence community designated position. He is also the author of the book, The Meadow Project, Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch, which we hope we'll be talking with him about today. Trey Hudson, thank you for your service to our country and welcome to Anomalies.
Welcome, Trey.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. What I tell people is that sounds real. All that sounds really cool, but I'm really just an ordinary guy that's had some extraordinary opportunities in my life, and some of the stuff I did, in Department of Defense and in Army Intelligence. Obviously, I can't go into, but as far as high strangeness, I love sharing this with the world because it's the world's story. It's not my story. It belongs to the world.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. We're so happy that you're with us today to do some of that. So I think I'll ask Dan, would you like to begin the interview?
Oh, sure, I'd love to. So I saw the interview you did with an upcoming guest that we have, Jessica Jones, and
Mhm.
I think you were saying in there you started out as a paranormal investigator doing ghost investigations. Then you got into cryptids, then you did UFOs, and you just are into strange things. And I thought, well, this is the perfect guy to have on this show because that's all we think about are strange things. So, well, let's kind of skip over the military aspect of your life, and
Mhm.
I'm not doing that because it's not important.
Right.
I want to get to the strange stuff. So, what was the first experience you had with ghosts, with UFOs, with cryptids that said, maybe there's more to reality than I think there is?
Uh, you know, Really the first thing that actually was concrete. Now I'm gonna back up. I'm gonna get in Mr. Doolittle's Wayback Machine and go back, quite a bit.
Okay, good.
Is I grew up in the 70s. I was born in the 60s. And I grew up in the 70s watching things like In Search of, the
Mm,
Bionic Man and Bigfoot, and I have a poster. You can't see it here, but a wonderful movie called Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, the Legend of Sasquatch was a kind of a documentary sort of film back in the 70s. So I just really came to love this stuff. I was like this little maladaptive sponge, as a child, soaking all this stuff in. And it probably makes me as weird as I am today. And then I went to the University of West Georgia, not Virginia, but that's okay. because I'd get
I
a
apologize.
that's fine. I'd get a beat down from some of my old professors because I've gone back and lectured there, so I don't want to get beat up by them. But at the University of West Georgia, they had a very unique program there where they do a transpersonal, humanistic field of study or area of study. And they had a world famous parapsychologist on their staff, on their faculty. It was Dr. William Roll, Bill Roll, famous parapsychologist. And, as I was studying under him, I had this epiphany that, I was always intrigued by this stuff, but I started hearing, academic, accounts of things that just can't be explained. And I just had this, like I said, an epiphany, like a bulb went on. It's like, there's more to the world than this and, this and all of this. It's, it's much more broader. So that was really kind of an epiphany. And then I joined a local ghost hunting group, and I usually hate that term. It was a paranormal investigation group. And I started seeing things firsthand. I started actually recording EVPs, which I'd always read about. But now I'm actually recording EVPs, and we're actually doing two-way communications using instrumental transcommunication with ghost boxes and synthetic voice generators and things like that. And that just really, cemented this belief, this understanding, this knowledge that there was more to the world than we originally, were taught, And so I was very, very fortunate to be exposed to a university program that had such a very broad worldview. And they now have a parapsychology department and several other things there now. So fast forward is I was a ghost guy, and I looked at things through the optics of a ghost guy, is it dead Uncle Fred? Is it disembodied spirits? Is it, demons? What is it? And the Meadow actually started off as a ghost investigation, which is kind of interesting. We back in the late 90s, mid 2000s, after the ghost show started kind of ebbing a little bit, the referrals to like traditional residential and business investigations started dwindling. We just weren't getting a lot of referrals. We were a member of the Taps family for quite a while. So, I put the word out to my team. I said, we need to start investigating things a little off the beaten path. And when I mean off the beaten path, I literally mean off the beaten path. Let's get out of the houses and get out of the businesses and go out and look at some of this folklore. And we found this folklore in this area that talked about a haunted road. And when I started looking into this area, I found not only were there a lot of, ghost stories, a lot of folklore there, there was a ton of UFO sightings, a lot of UAP stuff and Bigfoot sightings. So I went from being like a paranormal researcher, and then I kind of started looking into cryptids because this area had a really rich cryptid, background. And then I started looking into UAPs. I became a MUFON field investigator, still am. And then I started having these experiences that don't fit into any of those boxes. So what I tell people now, I'm a weird crapologist. If it's weird, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to investigate. And I look at it from, as Gwen kind of alluded to, a multidisciplinary perspective. I don't try to put things in any box. And the more I research this, the more I talk to people all over the world, I'm finding that seems to be the most productive and the most logical way to approach these things. And our results are phenomenal. They speak for themselves. So, as long as we're allowed to, we'll continue down that multiple disciplinary path.
Yeah, in a previous life, I used to be a sociology professor. And one of the first things you learn in that discipline is that reality is socially constructed.
It is.
Reality is what people say it is. Well, there's plenty of examples out there. Bigfoot doesn't exist. UFOs don't exist. Then you have an experience that says, whoa, that's not the truth. So I totally get where you're coming from.
Absolutely. That's one thing that's in part of the mission statement for the ASOG, Anomalous Studies and Observation Group, is we focus not only on empirical data, but experiential circumstances. The experiencer is just as important as the experience. And like my degree is in humanistic and transpersonal psychology. So I really believe that if we don't focus on the human experience, then what in the hell are we really doing? Why are we even bothering?
Right.
Because the best piece of equipment I have out there to detect high strangeness is a human being. And if we discount all of that, we're fools for doing so.
I would concur. Gwen, you want to jump in here? I
Yeah,
don't want to
I would
monopolize
also
Trey.
agree. Daniel and I do a lot of work with contact experiencers.
Mhm.
I've been working on it for years. Dan's been working on it for a while too. We counsel a lot of people, talk to a lot of people, and we've long said that if you want to know what's happening, you got to go to the experiencers.
Yeah.
So, and so we agree with you 100% there. And I'm happy to hear that people like you who have a background in real serious investigations are moving closer. We kind of seem to be moving closer together in this.
Mhm.
So those of us like me who really don't care to do a lot of the work outdoors like you do, a lot of the investigations, then I can rely on you and investigators like you to bring that information in. And then perhaps we can share on the other side with, what we're learning from investigators. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We have had experiences, you're talking about experiencers, where, and I'm going to tell you, this is going to sound very familiar. After a very unique evening of extreme high strangeness, one of my team members started having dreams of being watched in her bedroom when she was sleeping. Things were watching her. And then she was dreaming about orbs coming into her bedroom and moving around her. And then she started dreaming and having experiences of things actually standing around her bed. Now, where in the world have we ever heard about something like that? So the good news is I actually have a licensed psychotherapist and a hypnotherapist who has agreed to work with us and do hypnotic regression, kind of John Mack kind of stuff, and Bud Hopkins kind of stuff. So we're really focusing on the totality of the experience. And we're now experiencing dream speak. We're getting communications while some of my team members are sleeping, which have turned out to be, some of them are precognitive, which is kind of weird. So it's like I said, weird crapologist, hey, sign me up. I'm there.
Well, if we didn't have people like that, we wouldn't know anything, so that you are the people, we are the people who do the boots on the ground, finding out the information. So thank you so much for doing that. And it's fascinating. What I'd like to do is take a step back and ask you a question about when you have served in the military. I'm mainly concerned about combat situations, or when you're actually assigned, in a location like that. I have spoken with many people, and there's a lot of information about this, about people who have had unusual experiences, UFOs, paranormal experiences in combat situations. And I've always been very fascinated about that, especially the Vietnam War, but even after that. So my question to you is, have you had anything that was just really weird, off the wall in your training, or when you were in Afghanistan, for instance, that you could talk about?
Yeah, my experiences in Afghanistan, I was actually over there as a Department of Defense anti-terrorism officer. So I wasn't technically a soldier. I mean, I wore a uniform and everything, but I was a non-combatant. But that didn't mean anything to the Afghans that were shooting at us. So the worst thing that I had over there happen is we would be rocketed from time to time. So you would get rocketed while you were sleeping, and just hope one didn't fall on you while you were asleep.
Yeah.
And as far as weird experiences, other than some of the meals in the mess hall, I never really had anything that was too, that would count as high strangeness. But Afghanistan is one of those weird countries. It's almost feudal. It's almost like Europe in the 12th century is kind of the way people think there. So they have like a very, even though they are an Islamic, a Muslim country, they still have a very pre-Muslim attitude towards things. They still talk about the jinn and a lot of stuff like that. So unfortunately, I was just really so busy with other stuff as an anti-terrorism officer, I didn't get a chance to really delve into some of the folkloric stuff there. But as far as anything in those experiences, I haven't had anything that I would call high strangeness during any
during that time.
during that
Yeah.
in a combat theater.
Yeah. Well, I know that other people have talked about that.
Sure.
So I just wanted to see, what your experience was in that area. So, Dan?
Well, Trey, have you ever heard of OPUS, Organization for Paranormal Understanding and Support?
That does ring a bell. So it's somewhere the gray matters are firing, so that I have
Yeah.
heard of it.
Well, Gwen and I are both part of that organization. You talked about a situation where you had contracted, your organization had contracted with some professional counselors, hypnotherapists, whatever, to deal with people that have these strange experiences. And that program that Gwen and I belong to does the same thing. So the people that you work with might want to look into Opus because they're
Okay.
always looking for resource
Sure.
people in different parts of the country. Another
Yeah.
thing I wanted to talk about, this is the thing. Oh, Gwen, did you want to add something to that?
No, I just wanted to say that I'll be happy to send you some information about the organization.
Oh,
So in
please
case
do.
you have a need, you'll know who to contact. So yeah,
Very good. Thank you.
go ahead, Dan.
Well, I'm a kind of guy that's really interested in strange places. So the Meadow is what attracted me. Tell us, and I know there's some confidentiality things that go on there because just like the people at Skinwalker Ranch, you don't want, 20,000 people coming doing interviews there. So tell us about the Meadow and the kinds of things that have occurred there. And then maybe we can get into why you think they're occurring there.
Yeah, some of the we've been really researching the Meadow since 2016. So the Meadow Project is an ongoing effort. It's not, in there one and done and we're out. So we've been, researching this for quite a while. And going back as far as July of 2016, that's when we really started experiencing the high strangeness. Now I'm going to describe the Meadow. I'm going to try to paint a picture in people's minds. I want them to imagine a mountain meadow. And this is in the America Southland. So it's not a Rocky Mountain meadow, but more like a, Appalachian kind of meadow. Beautiful, just absolutely gorgeous, just breathtaking in its beauty. That's open. To the north, you have a ridge that runs across it with a hiking trail on top of that ridge. To the south, a large creek. And we started looking at the meadow because in January of 2016, while we were looking at the haunted road, we had an amazing UAP experience there where one of my team members saw a large luminescent orb come up in the sky and then move from right to left and then wink out. I don't know about where you're from. The moon doesn't move like that, in this part of the world. So we thought, well, forget that haunted road business. This is where the action's at. So about a quarter of a mile, half a mile from this campsite where we had this experience, there was a large field. And we said, let's kind of focus on that for several reasons. Number one, it's wide open. If we have teams in the field with night vision and thermal, anything walking across it, we can pick up on thermals. It has grass. Anything walking across it would leave a track line. I'm thinking Sasquatch now. We can see the sky. So I'm thinking UAP. And also we can put somebody up on top of the ridge to observe down into it to see if anything moves down below them. So it's a perfect spot to set up an observation post. So that's what we did in July of 2016. Our operational template for that weekend was we were going to have teams set up in the meadow, equipped with thermal and night vision, and have a single individual walk across the top of the ridge to see if he could force anything down into the meadow. And he could also provide a bit of overwatch. So we had our team set up in the meadow, and we radioed back, told the individual that was going to walk the ridge to go ahead and start. So we didn't hear anything for a while. Then the individual comes back and he says, hey, everybody, I'm at the tree across the trail, which was a well-known landmark. And he said, I don't remember how I got here. So the first thing we thought was, okay, maybe it's a medical emergency. Okay, we all have our normalcy box, our normalcy bias. So we automatically jumped into our normalcy bias, must be a medical incident. So one of our paramedics got on the got on the radio and said, okay, do you have numbness? No. Say the ABCs. So he said the ABCs. Did you fall down? No. Do you have a headache? No. So we're thinking, okay, maybe he was just really focused on the mission and just, didn't remember how he went ahead and he moved across the top of the ridge with no further incident, dropped out into the west end of the meadow and started working his way east. Well, as soon as he dropped down on the meadow, the teams brought their thermals up because we're constantly in radio contract and we use a military methodology when we're in the field. There is a operational commander. Nobody moves off station without permission. We always have accountability of all our teams. So there's not a lot of people running around doing their own thing. So we had an idea when he dropped down out of the field or out of the off the ridge into the meadow, and they're watching him on their thermals. And they see him on their thermals clearly. They drop their thermals down and they're watching, where he's at, and they see this sphere of energy, this light ball appear, a giant orb, and it moves about 100 yards and then stops and then winks out. And they quickly bring their thermals up, and now they see him standing where that orb was.
Yeah.
Well, he just traveled, about 100 meters in just a few seconds, and we calculated it out. He would have been had to be moving about 26 miles per hour. And so they quickly got on the radio and they said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Why?" No, what? Or do you feel fine? Yeah, I feel fine. What's wrong? Well, why don't you come over to us and we'll talk about it? So he comes over and he's talking to this team, which is made up. Let me tell you what the team is made up of. 2 men. The first man is named Daryl, has a degree in management from the Georgia Institute of Technology, has a master's degree in public administration, and has been in the emergency medicine for his career. Second man, veteran of the U.S. Army and the 75th Ranger Regiment, special operations guy, has a degree in physics and psychology from the Georgia Institute of Technology, and was working for one of the big 3 automakers doing IT and AI stuff. Very solid guys, not some guys I dredged out of the trailer park. So they said to Bob, the individual they just saw, "We just saw you turn into a ball of energy." And he's like, "No." "Well, what happened?" "Nothing happened. I just walked over here." "Well, no, you didn't. You turned into this energy and you flew across the meadow. You didn't just walk over here." "Well, yes, I did. You guys don't know what you're talking about." And these 2 gentlemen are like, "No, we both saw it." So at that instance, reality was not the same. It was like Schrodinger's cat. The cat was alive and dead. We were actually observing and experiencing a quantum effect on a macro scale. 2 realities existed at the same time. Reality number 1, where he just plainly walked across the meadow at a leisurely rate, talking about perception. There's perception number 1. Perception number 2, by my observers, they observed him turn into a ball of energy and move at inhuman speeds and turn back into a human being. Both realities existed at the same time, at the same place, with wildly different perceptions. So I don't know. I would call that high strangeness. So
Yes, I
let's
would
check
too.
that as high strangeness. So we always have a base camp operator. This night, the gentleman's name was Gwen, flight medic, very squared away, very, very squared away, dialed in dude. He gets on the radio and says, "Hey guys, why are you coming over the top of the ridge returning to camp? That's a very rugged route. But I see your headlights. Why are you using green headlights?" And we radioed back. It's like, "Glenn, we're in the meadow and nobody has a green headlight." And he goes, "Well, I'm looking at your headlights up on top of oh crap. Those are about 30 feet above the ground." So he's seeing green orbs above our campsite. So then later on that night, Glenn, the same base camp operator, gets up to take care of some biological business in the middle of the night, like happens when you're camping. And so he's taking care of this business and he sees a white hominid peering from behind a tree. Now, in Bigfoot lore, people talk about the tree peepers. They'll have a creature watch them from behind a tree. Except this thing was white. go back in the folklore of this area, and there's folklore going way back of a white humanoid figure that lived in the woods, which people put in the Bigfoot box and say it's a white Bigfoot. All I'm saying is this was a white humanoid shaped creature, shoulder heads, things like that. Could have been anything. So, like old Ron Popel used to say on the commercials, but wait, there's more. When you didn't think it could get any weirder, the next morning, Bob, the individual who had the missing time and the ball of light experience, came to us with his GPS. Now, he has a background in backcountry rescue in California. He did years of rugged backcountry rescue with search dogs in California. And he always carries a GPS with him. And his GPS always has the tracking feature on. So it creates a breadcrumb trail of wherever he goes, as he moves around during a research or an investigation. He says, guys, look at this. And he pulled up his GPS, and the track line were several straight lines, going from point A to point B to C, C to D, E to F, straight lines. This terrain is so rugged, you cannot travel in a straight line, either on foot or by vehicle. But how could you travel in a straight line over terrain where you could travel in a straight line? In the air.
Strange.
So, like happens so often in these cases, we told him, hey, as soon as you get back home, download that data, and we'll pull up our Magellan software, and we can all really, really dig into and analyze these weird track lines, because it just didn't make sense. It had him on the other side of the creek. His feet were never wet, things like that. And he got home, and everything was erased off his SIM card. There was no data was there at all. Now, the good thing is several people saw the track line on his GPS and, have affidavits to that fact. So that was in July 2016 in the Meadow. So I don't know. This sounds like this might be a place to continue investigating. What do y'all think? Yeah. We said, yeah, we're definitely going to investigate. So we went back in February of 2017. So just a few months later. And this is where things get really weird, as if they weren't weird already.
Right.
Is we decided we were going to have a new protocol where nobody goes out by themselves. That was not a good idea, to have a guy go out by himself. So new protocol, nobody goes out by themselves. You always have at least one person on the team with radio contact with the other teams and radio contact back to base camp. We now have established what we call a QRF, or quick reaction force, that can respond to a person or a team in trouble. So we went back into the field with some of these new protocols in effect, same operational template as before, set several teams out with their equipment in the meadow, and said this time we were going to have a ridge team running across a ridge of 3 people. It was Bob, the individual that had the missing time, myself, and Daryl were the ridge team that night. So we're moving across the top of the ridge, and we notice several heat signatures in the meadow down below. February, no vegetation, very clear visibility. Saw several deer, very clear, very distinct on the thermals. And then we saw some figures, or a figure that was man-sized. I'm not going to say man-shaped, I'm going to say man-sized. A very clear vertical heat signature, about 6 foot high, 24 inches wide. And the weird thing about this heat signature is it started off small, and then it would get big, and then it would get small, and then it would get big, then it got small, got big again, and then turned into 2 distinct heat signatures. And we have this on video and have it enhanced. So it's like these kind of blobs, changing sizes. We radioed down to our teams. It did not correspond with any of our teams. So we had something going on that we had captured on video. So we dropped down into the field, and once again, we're working our way, from the west back to the east. And one of the team members comes on board or comes on the radio and says, "Hey, something really strange is going on. You need to meet us." He said, "I'm picking up a box or a cube on my thermal." It's like, okay, that certainly is odd. So we make it over there, And by the time he was able to hit record on his thermal, the thing had pretty much dissipated. Now, the thing about thermal cameras, if you run them, on video all the time, A, you eat up a lot of video space or a lot of storage space, and B, you'll run your battery down. So he turned on his thermal record just about the time that the thing dissipated. So we got there and he showed us on thermal where it was. And we decided we were going to dispatch a team to the area where this thing was, this box or cube. And the way he described it was on thermal, it was a box that was colder than its surroundings. It was more chilly than the surroundings. So we dispatched a team over there, and we're recording this on thermal. Now we have our thermals going. And the team walks over there, and as they get to where this thing was, they disappear off our equipment, off our instruments. The odd thing is we have tried to recreate that. We've actually gone back to the same site at the same time of year. And on thermal, you can see 300 yards up the ridge. You can't hide from the thermals. And we have a recreation where we videotape, people going through heavy vegetation, and you never lose their thermal signature. But we lost theirs. To tie it all together is they had a very different experience when they stepped into this area. Is they said when they stepped into it or walked towards it, they didn't encounter any brambles or briars or anything. They just walked into it. While they were there, the temperature was cooler. It was, colder than the surroundings. And they said it was very dark, almost like they were inside of a black velvet bag. Just very, very, not oppressive, but just very dark, almost like an absence of light. And so they decided, okay, we've been in here enough, we need to exit. So when they started coming out, now they're encountering the brambles and the briars that weren't there before. And then we saw them once again on FLIR come out on thermal, when they exited. And like before, it's as though that their reality had shifted just a little bit when they were inside the remnants of this thing. And, we think that either this was a remnant of the effect, or the thing had changed enough to where we just weren't able to detect it. It was still there. Their reality shifted just a little bit, vice our reality. So once again, you had two quantum states existing on a macro scale based on the experience and the perceptions of the experiencers. Where this becomes really interesting is if you go back and you look at the famous Higdon case of Oxbow, I think it's Oxbow, Wyoming, that Leo Sprinkle investigated for APRO, is there was a cube or a box that Mr. Higgins encountered in the forest. David Paulides, in his latest documentary, Missing 401, the UFO Collection, did a reenactment of that, and he had a recreation of what this cube or box looked like. When I saw that, when I was watching the documentary, my jaw hit the floor, because it was the exact same thing that we detected in the Meadow, a box or a cube. Now, all through UFO lore and history, boxes and cubes have a certain esoteric, occultic, or otherworldly type connotation, something about boxes and cubes. So it was, we decided that was so important that we went back to camp and we did a video after action review while it was still fresh on everybody's mind. And we have a video, not only of them disappearing from view on the thermal, we also have about a 45-minute video of the after action report, where everybody was reviewing what happened. So we decided that this video was very important. We took one of our team members, created a small pouch out of aluminum foil to block any radio frequencies from damaging the SIM card from the thermal video. Put it in the pouch, sent him back to his home via motorcycle, and he quickly locked that up in his safe. So we've got multiple copies of that video in existence, locked in RF proof, containers. So that is the famous, and I'm going to say it, sounds like a portal. Okay. They stepped into something where the reality on the other side of that something is different than our reality.
Wow.
So, and it's on video. So as far as I know, that might be the only video evidence of people stepping into one of these things.
Mm.
I have not shared that video for several years for a lot of reasons. One is it was tied up with a contract with a production company and I couldn't share it. I have been released from that contract. I am now in discussion with a production company, and it looks like we're going to make a documentary on the Meadow.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So that's that was in February 2017. That was one weekend, one outing.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's something I forgot to mention, and I should have put it here in my notes. Oh yeah, here it is while we were videotaping the team going into this thing, one of my team members swings her thermal over and she says, "Who or what is that?" And much to our surprise, we encountered the same upright heat signatures, 6 feet tall, 18 inches wide, watching us from a small group of trees that did not correspond with the known locations of any team members. So whatever those figures were we saw earlier appeared to be watching us as we were attempting to interact with the cube or the box or whatever.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're going to be bringing that that footage forward in a documentary. I hope you find a company to do that for you, that you can really get it out there where we can all see it. We'll be looking forward to it. It's amazing. One thing I was interesting that you mentioned, and you just now mentioned it again, is the being or the image that you saw. That it sounded like it kind of morphed in a way. It started maybe in a straight and then it changed shape a bit.
Yeah.
That type of thing has been reported by experiencers in contact situations or even in CE5. I'm sure you know what CE5 is. CE5 events that they've been doing, that they have seen beings like that too. And so is it the same thing? Well, maybe not. Or maybe it's just the same type of manifestation of something. So it's food for thought.
You were talking about CE5, of course, Dr. Stephen Greer's, and he's a very polarizing figure, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but CE5 is a very solid protocol.
Absolutely.
Many members of my team are trained remote viewers. We've been trained in coordinate remote viewing. So we decided we were going to do a CE5 session in the Meadow. So this was, I'd have to go back and look on my notes. It was not too, as in June 2020. So it wasn't, that long ago. So we go out in the Meadow and, we started doing the CE5 protocols. We play the crop circle tones, to kind of get things boosted. And then we started projection intent, intent, welcoming, and then drawing in, whatever. And all we saw were a bunch of satellites. Skunked. Okay, dang it, nothing happened. We thought. The next morning, one of my team members, a gentleman by the name of Tony has an engineering degree from the U.S. Air Force Academy, spent several years in U.S. Air Force Special Operations, and now is an expert in his technical field and travels all over the world solving problems. So he's that guy. And so Tony, as we were packing up Sunday morning, says, "Hey, Trey, I need to tell you about a dream I had, or I think it was a dream." And we all know sometimes dreams aren't what they first appear to be. He said, "I was laying there at about 0430 hours, and I had these words just pop into my consciousness." And he said the word was Nox Magby. And I'm going to spell that, kind of phonetically, Nox, November, Oscar, X-ray, Magby, Mike, Alpha, Golf, Bravo, Echo, Nox Magby. He said, I didn't think anything of it, and I fell back asleep. Then at 0630, I woke up again with those words just, screaming in my head. And he said, "Does that mean anything to you?" And I said, "Well, no, not off the top of my head." I said, "But I'm going to do some research." So I started doing some research on that. And what I found is Nox is the personification of the Roman goddess of the night.
Really?
The Greeks called her Nyx, Nyx. as you know, the Romans took a lot of the Greek mythology, just renamed it. So the Romans renamed her Nox. So here we have the goddess of the night. Magby was a little bit more challenging. So I started doing a lot of linguistic searches for a word similar to that. And what I found is in the Old English poem Beowulf, there's a word called Magba, and it means children or kindred. Now you have Old English spoken at the time of Beowulf and the Roman goddess. Now you remember the Romans occupied Britain for a very long time, and then when they retreated, that's what brought on the Dark Ages, as they called. So it's reasonable that a contemporary Old English speaker would have some knowledge of the Roman gods and goddesses. So the words are contemporaneous. So you put those two together and you have children of the night goddess. Now, what do we have that comes into people's houses at night, small like children, with large heads like children?
Graves.
And I'll give you a hint. One is standing right behind Gwen, and Whitley Strieber put one on the cover of Communion. Children of the night goddess. So that was how CE5 manifested in a very unexpected way with us. And so, we've had, other instances of this weird kind of dream speak happening to people when they're out there in the meadow.
Very interesting. Yeah. Dan, did you want to?
Well, there's so much to delve into. And realizing I don't want to identify where the meadow is, but how big an area is it, Trey? How big an area we're talking about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Is the meadow itself is probably about 4 acres. Now, what's interesting is, kind of like other areas like Skinwalker Ranch, the high strangeness isn't just happening on Skinwalker Ranch.
Right.
It's happening all over the Uinta Valley Basin. I have a friend of mine that actually owns a piece of property not too far from Skinwalker Ranch, which has all kinds of high strangeness going on. So the meadow is the same way. The meadow has had high strangeness stuff go on there, but we have also researched other areas, within a 10-mile radius, and had other very high strangeness, events go on. So I would say, I'm just going to say this region, within 100-mile radius, is very, very familiar and well acquainted with high strangeness of all sorts, be it cryptids, be it UFOs, ghosts, things like that. This area, this whole region just has a lot of high strangeness. So we've done, like I said, other investigations in areas within a few miles of it, and have had UAP sightings and strange occurrences and, being touched by invisible, beings, things like that. So it's, the whole area is strange.
Any indication that Robert Bigelow is interested in purchasing any of that?
Yeah, is it like a, Mount Wilson or anything like that? No, not that. It's very strange. You should mention that, because I always thought that either Bigelow or Brandon Fugel would be interested in this. They can't purchase this because it's on public land. That's one reason I don't disclose the location, because it's on public land. The odd thing about it is either the governmental entity that owns this, and I'm not going to say whether it's, county, state, federal, I'm not going to get that specific, but whatever the governmental entity is that owns this, either is not aware of this high strangeness, or they really don't care. I've never had, I've had, like game wardens and, rangers and stuff, come through our camp and all, and they stop and say hi. We've got several retired law enforcement guys. So they say howdy. And nobody really seems too terribly interested in what we're doing, because I think they will acknowledge that they know something is going on, but I don't think they really understand to what level. But that, like I said, the whole area is just really, really weird. And about the first 25% of my book, I really dig into the folklore and strange occurrences in this region, and I go from macro, multi-state, and I zoom it into this exact this nature preserve.
Okay.
Would be,
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
well, this is just where my mind goes. Not only am I thinking about Robert Bigelow, I'm thinking about the Department of Defense might be interested in some of the stuff that's going on here. There's stuff, and I don't know, because you have ties to that organization, whether you'd have any insights to that or not.
Yeah, that's interesting because, everybody, talks about, and let me just say this, I am the one guy that worked in the intelligence community that had nothing to do with the UAPs. You get all kinds of people come up and say, oh, I was on this program, blah. I had nothing to do with it. But I was involved in some other stuff that involved very, very tight support from Department of Defense counterintelligence agencies. And I'm talking about like monthly meetings, with the agents, special agents that would come down and work with me on stuff. And one of the agents was really interested in this kind of stuff. So, he's, said, chit-chatting, and I, told him about this stuff, and I, wrote a book, and he goes, oh man, I've got to buy it. So he bought the book, and he loved it so much that he had me autograph it. This counterintelligence special agent. And so, but that was the only involvement or the only interest that DOD ever showed, was this one CIA agent, thought the book was really cool and had me autograph it.
Oh, interesting.
So no, they don't seem interested in it at all.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, that is good.
Yeah, good. I have a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. And one of them is something I believe you've already described, and that is what we in the contact area would call missing time. And so I'd like to know if you've had, in addition to what you talked about when the people went into the cube and there may have been some missing time there, have you had any other events of missing time in that area?
That is something that we're delving into. One of the things is you don't know that you have missing time unless you realize you have missing time. It's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
We do have, I mentioned one of my team members having dreams about intruders. She had a case where she was driving back to her home, which was several states away. And in the middle of nowhere, her car died. Completely dead. Now, where have we heard about that before? Does that sound familiar? And she's had other weird experiences. So she's on our list of people to regress. Now, overtly, does anybody have any missing time? I did have one team member. We were researching in actually a Bigfoot area in Florida, and I'm not going to go into it, but it was been on the Bigfoot shows. It was a private piece of property. And one of my team members kept having his digital watch lose an hour, which was really strange. I mean, it was continuous. And it's so strange that I wear a wind up analog watch now. I actually have to wind it every day because we would have these weird things happen with electronics. And we do time checks, when our teams are out in the field, is we do an hourly, time check and status check. And to my knowledge, other than those one or two events, I don't know of any missing time. Now, that doesn't mean it's not out there.
That's right.
None that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. Another question I have is, sticking with the Meadow area, is when you would go to the Meadow for a while, do some work for a few days or something, and then leave to go back to reality or back to your families and your jobs, whatever. And then
I know what you're going to ask. The answer is yes.
And then you would return. My question is, did you see changes? I mean, did things change within the time?
The Meadow doesn't change. And what I thought you were going to ask is about hitchhikers.
Oh, no, but that's good too.
Yeah. The Meadow has been relatively static. I did have an experience. Now, you were talking about changes and missing time. Now, this is weird. This is weird. Yeah, all this is weird. But this is another weird thing is we had gone out to the Meadow, and one of our team members had suddenly passed away. Now, something I'm just going to tell people about this. His illness was very sudden. There is myriad records of people experiencing very severe health issues after encountering incidents of high strangeness.
Hmm.
So I'll put this out there to the listeners. If you get involved in this, I'm not saying that his death was caused by his encounters with high strangeness, but there is a personal risk, if you delve into this. So I'm just going to put that out there. So anyway, this gentleman passed away, and we had gone out to memorialize. It was during COVID. We didn't get to go to his funeral. And so myself and another team member decided while we were there, we weren't really going to investigate. We just wanted to, memorialize him. But we were going to go out there and take some baseline readings in the meadow since, we had the equipment and we had the time. So what we did is we know the exact GPS coordinates of different locations in the meadow where we've had different incidents happen. So we went and we were recording baselines of radiation, EMF, and geomagnetic fluctuation for the compass. So we're going around, recording all of this stuff. And we decided we were going to cross the creek to the south and do a little exploring on that side. So I crossed the creek. My team member crosses with me. And as I get to the other side of the creek, there's this other field, big open field. And I'm like, holy cow, this is great. This is like another research area. How cool is this? We can have like teams on both sides of the creek, and we just doubled our research area. And so I'm yelling to my team member that I'm at this location. It's really amazing. She's just really going to be blown away. And she goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "No, I'm standing in this other field. It's just really cool." And she goes, "Stay there. I'm coming to you." So I'm like, okay. So I'm standing there waiting for her. And she comes over and she goes, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Look at this. Isn't this great?" She goes, "Trey, you're where you started. You're where we started." And I'm like, "No, we're not." She goes, "What are you talking about? You've been in this field probably 50 or 60 times.
Hmm.
And I'm going to try to articulate this. This is very hard to put into words, but as she was explaining to me that it was the place we started from, it's almost like the place shifted, and it shifted back into what I was familiar with. And I was so disoriented that she radioed back to base camp and said, "Hey, Trey's like really disoriented." Now that's very uncommon for me. I've backpacked all over the US. I've hunted big game in the US and Africa. I'm a former Army intelligence officer. I'm an Eagle Scout. I've earned the 50-miler award in scouting 3 times. I'm very comfortable outdoors, very, very comfortable. Very unlike me to get totally discombobulated, out in the woods. But yet this was happening. And so my medic got on the radio and he says, "Hey, I want to do an assessment." I'm like, "Everybody just leave me alone. I don't want to talk to anyone. Give me 10 minutes. And it took me about 10 minutes to get my wits about me. And the strange thing is when this event happened, we had a spike in radiation because I said we were using Geiger counters to record radiation baselines. Is the baseline in that area is about 0.06 microsieverts per hour. The radiation spiked to 0.33 microsieverts per hour when this event happened. So that's something that we're seeing are these little tiny spikes in radiation when these events take place. So I wonder, even to this day, that sounds like something out of one of David Paulides' books. And if I hadn't had these tight protocols where nobody goes out there by themselves, you always have radio comms back with base camp, would you be reading a chapter about this guy named Trey Hudson that went missing in this meadow?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I have a question I want to ask you that may be a little on the personal side. If you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. And that is, have you done any, I won't necessarily say therapy, but I'm going to say perhaps hypnosis or perhaps counseling of some kind to explore your experiences and especially that experience? And if you haven't, you think you might, or are you not interested in doing that?
I have not. Part of that has to do with I held a top secret clearance up until May of this year. You have to be very careful when you hold a clearance like that. So I did not, take that route. That is possibly on the agenda when my hypnotherapist starts working with my team members to start exploring the high strangeness with most of the team members.
Yeah, good.
And the good news is I'm 4 chapters into my second book, and what comes out of these hypnoregression sessions will be in the second book.
We'll go in there. Okay, it sounds wonderful. Well, I don't want to keep you too long. And Dan, did you have another question before we kind of start to round this out?
Right, I think Trey probably has other things to do besides talk to us. One thing we haven't talked about that's very fascinating for me is the place aspect of this. And that's why I was asking the size of the meadow. So we've got the Skinwalker Ranch. Gwen, whether she knows it or not, knows somebody who lives on a very strange piece of property here in Washington State, where she has cryptids, where she's got UFOs. So what is there about these places like the Meadows, Skinwalker Ranch that causes all this weird stuff to happen? And I'm thinking back to something I heard you talking to Jessica about, ley lines. Talk about that if you can.
Yeah, that's it's one, ley lines are one of those things. Is it, it's correlation create causality? I don't know. There seems to be a correlation, between some of these sites, that seems to be linear. I don't know if you know the researcher James Keenan. He and I have talked about, James is convinced that there's some sort of subterranean and geomagnetic, essence to, what we're experiencing, that he's experienced in other sites. And so he's just, anxious to get down to the meadow and bring some of his equipment and check that out. So I don't know if it's geomagnetic. I don't know if these events of high strangeness are tied to a geographical location, or if it's something that the others, whatever they are. We did some very cool SD sessions where it certainly looks like we were in communications with an entity that had something to do with the meadow and the boxer cube. So is there something special about those locations that they can manifest whatever it is they're trying to do at these certain geographic locations? Is it accidental? I would say probably not, because you do see a correlation. One thing I do think is there is a whole lot of these things out there. And I think if people, start doing their research and, going back to folklore, Native American folklore, and bringing it forward, they're going to find out that there's a lot of these locations all over the world. And there might even be one in there, within 10 miles of where the listeners are sitting right now.
Yeah.
So that's the big mystery is, what is the correlation? What is the link to these sites? And I don't have a definitive answer. I wish I did. I know ley lines might be part of the puzzle. It might not be. It might be a red herring. But, we're going to continue to look and see what we can figure out.
All right. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. Before we end, would you like to give our readers an email address or a website where they can reach you?
Sure. There's a couple ways to do it. Is just go behind your local liquor store, look in a cardboard box. I'm usually, sleeping there with a bottle of cheap vodka. No, I'm kidding. 2 ways to do it. If you go to Facebook and you type in Trey Hudson -author, that's my Facebook page. You can go to TreyHudsonResearch.com. That's my website. There's a link on there to buy the book. You can also go to Amazon, type in Trey Hudson in the search bar, and the Meadow Project will come up. It's available hardback, softback, ebook, and audiobook. So, whatever your flavor is. Also, it's in French. So I had it translated into French. So anybody parlez-vous français, they're more than welcome to that.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's been really great to have you here, and I think we would love to have you come back again at some point next year, maybe after the first of the year, and visit with us again. I'm sure you'll be doing lots of more interesting things. So we kind of like to ask a kind of a traditional last question in Anomalies, and that is based on the work that you've done as a researcher, and paranormal and all the other types of research that you've done, and just a human being who has curiosity and intelligence. what we have found over the years is that we tend to put things into boxes.
Yes.
Over here's UFOs. We have UFOs and ETs in this one box over here, and over here we have the paranormal and we have the spiritual. And so all the work that you've done, what have you come to believe about how those things work together? And how do you think that is going to help us as humanity to move forward?
Oh, that is a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that, because that's one of the things that I'm trying to break down in this field, is people putting themselves into boxes. They all have their normalcy bias. And if you imagine a bunch of people looking at the Mona Lisa through toilet paper tubes, they're seeing one part of it. And one toilet paper tube might be called, religion, culture, natural, tendencies, your own way of looking at the thing. And only until we take our toilet paper tubes down do we see the whole beautiful piece of art. And I think what we're seeing is, and I take a very John Keel kind of look at these things, is we're all seeing different facets of the same diamond. And John Keel coined a term, ultra-terrestrials.
Ultra-terrestrials, right?
Okay, the term that I've coined and I use is paradimensionals. And as these entities from other dimensions manifest themselves into our dimension, they will either manifest, maybe this looks like a Bigfoot, or another part of their reality is manifesting over here. It's like, oh, that's a UFO or an alien. And another part manifests. And it's like, well, that's obviously a ghost. Well, what if it's all of it and none of it? Truths do not equal truth. Your truth is not my truth, and it does not equal the totality of truth. So as long as we keep researching this, as long as we keep looking at it, as long as we keep asking those questions from a multidisciplinarian point of view, and we keep those optics open, and like you said, stay out of your normalcy box, I think we can start peeling the onion back and getting closer to the truth. And that ultimate question is, are we really alone?
Great. Thank you. Fascinating. Well, thank you so much, Trey. It was really a lot of fun to meet you and have you with us today. And we're looking forward to having another opportunity to meet with you. So before we close today, Dan, would you like to help me talk about our upcoming shows?
If I can remember what they are.
Okay.
I think tomorrow we've got Bruce Smith, who's a returning person. He's going to be talking about a book he wrote on D.B. Cooper. So that should be kind of interesting. If anybody's flown lately, you understand the significance of D.B. Cooper. And then later on in the week, we have Mark Ollie, who is a Brit, an archaeologist who studied Roswell and studied an event in England that seems to have some connections or similarities to Roswell. So those are the two that I'm most aware of. If you have some others.
Okay. Well, we have one more in December, and that is our very own Dan Hall is going to be giving us a presentation on his research into the Silver Bridge collapse, or the disaster that was in Point Pleasant, Virginia, West Virginia. It's one of the worst vehicular bridge collapses in the United States, and it may have been predicted by Mothman. So that's an aspect that we'll want to be talking about too. And I think the calendar for January is starting to fill up. So please stay with us, come back and share with us. And thank you very much. And happy holidays to everybody. Thank you, Trey.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's
yes,
always
please
good.
do that. Okay.
And thank you, Trey, very much for being on with us.
Bye-bye, everybody.